The scent of citrus polish couldn't hide the tension when a man no one wanted to serve walked through the glass doors. He said little, yet his presence bent the room like gravity. What looked like weakness was strategy. What seemed like silence was judgment waiting its turn. If you're ready for a story where arrogance collapses under truth, like subscribe and share where you're watching from. The rain came down steady and cold that morning, slicking the sidewalks and polishing the glass of the Braftoft Trust and Security Bank, until the city outside looked like a blurred reflection. The automatic doors sighed open, and a tall black man in a faded trench coat stepped through. His shoes leaked rainwater that left a quiet trail behind him, dark patches marking every careful step he took. His shoulders were squared, his posture straight, yet there was a weight about him, the kind that came from years of watching people decide who he was before he ever spoke. The lobby gleamed white and sterile, the scent of lemon polish hanging in the air like proof of perfection. But the moment he entered, the perfection fractured. Conversations paused. The whisper of shoe soles across marble slowed. The black man's coat was old, but clean, the kind that had survived seasons, not fashion. His left hand clutched a sealed envelope, thick parchment with a gold wax insignia pressed into it. He moved toward the reception desk, and before he said a word, a teller behind the counter smirked. "Sir," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "the food bank's across the street." Someone laughed softly. Another customer, adjusting his cufflinks, muttered, "He must have taken a wrong turn from the shelter." The man didn't flinch. He didn't glare. His silence filled the marble air like an echo that refused to die. He approached the waiting line, eyes scanning the digital screens displaying interest rates and mortgage ads that spoke of futures he could afford 10 times over, but no one knew that. The security scanner by the door blinked red, once an unnoticed flicker that briefly displayed the words "Clearance Level Executive" before returning to green. No one saw it except the young receptionist, Iris Vale, whose fingers froze mid-keystroke. Her stomach dropped, but she said nothing. She'd been trained to follow protocol, and protocol never protected truth. At the far end of the room, Delmont Rassian, the branch manager, looked up from his tablet. His hair was silver and styled to perfection, his tie tight, his expression cut from habit. He saw the man, instantly saw his skin, before his eyes saw his coat before the envelope, and in that single glance, judgment was complete. Delmont leaned toward a teller, whispered something, and both shared a quiet laugh before he crossed the floor, his shoes clicking like a metronome of authority. "Can I help you?" he asked, though it wasn't a question. The man turned his head slightly, his eyes calm, voice low. "I have business here." "Business," Delmont repeated, tasting the word. "You're sure this is the right location? We don't handle walk-in donations." Laughter rippled faintly behind the counter. The man looked at him, expression unreadable. "I'm here to withdraw." The word hung there like smoke. Delmont blinked, then chuckled. "Withdraw," he said, smiling for the audience now. "And what account would that be from city welfare or imagination?" A murmur of amusement rolled through the lobby. Iris's hands clenched beneath the desk, her throat tightening. She wanted to speak, to tell them to stop, but fear had its own kind of leash. The man remained still unbothered. He reached into his coat slowly, deliberately, and pulled out the gold-sealed envelope. The gesture was precise, respectful, even graceful. He held it out toward Delmont without a word. The seal glinted under the cold light, catching the manager's eye. But instead of taking it, Delmont raised a single hand. "You'll need to wait," he said smoothly, his tone now dipped in condescension. "We have real clients with actual accounts. There's a seating area." He nodded toward a metal chair near the janitor's bin, the place where delivery men waited for signatures. "You can sit there while I verify." The man's gaze followed the gesture, then returned to meet Delmont's eyes. "This will only take a moment." "I'm sure it will," Delmont said. The room chuckled again. The man didn't move for several seconds. Then, without visible frustration, he turned and walked to the chair. The click of his heels on the marble echoed with each step. He sat resting the envelope carefully on his lap. His posture didn't sag. His hands folded over the envelope, the gold seal gleaming faintly against the gray fabric of his coat. Behind him, whispers crawled through the air like static. "He smells like wet concrete," someone said. "Those shoes, oh my God!" Another voice laughed softly. "Maybe he's lost." The security guard. Darren shifted closer, his hand brushing his radio as if expecting trouble. The black man didn't look up. He watched the reflections in the marble floor. Instead, their movements, their avoidance, their fear disguised as superiority. He'd seen it all before. The laughter, the sidelong glances, the quiet cruelty of a system that disguised hatred as decorum. It wasn't new, it was exhausting. Iris glanced toward him again. Something in his stillness unsettled her. It wasn't submission, it was composure. Not the quiet of defeat, but the quiet of someone who knew exactly how much power he held and how long he could wait to use it. Delmont returned to his podium, pretending to study his screen. But he wasn't reading numbers. He was watching the man through the reflection in the glass. He hated the calmness, hated the sense that the man's silence wasn't born from fear but control, and that in some deep instinctive way made Delmont afraid. Outside, thunder rumbled softly over the skyline. The rain thickened, streaking the front windows with silver. The man's coat glistened faintly as droplets evaporated in the warmth of the building. A single bead of water rolled from his cuff and fell to the marble, forming a small, dark spot at his feet. He looked at it, then at his reflection in the glass wall ahead. What looked back wasn't a beggar, wasn't a man seeking favor. The air in the lobby seemed to have its own pulse, now the hum of computers and murmurs blending into a rhythm of judgment that played on repeat. The black man, still seated by the trash bin, looked like a painting forgotten on the wall, motionless, quietly defiant, belonging everywhere and nowhere at once. The rain outside intensified, soft drumming against the glass like the heartbeat of a storm, waiting for permission to enter. Delmont Ration returned to his station, pretending to check reports, but mostly glancing sideways at the man. Something about that envelope unsettled him. It wasn't just the color or the seal, it was the way the man held it with the deliberate care of someone handling power, not paper. Iris Vale tried to focus on her next client, but her eyes drifted toward the reflection on the counter, where the man's image sat faintly mirrored beneath the fluorescent lights. The gold seal glowed each time lightning flashed through the windows like it was breathing. Her gut whispered something she didn't dare name. When she reached for the stack of forms near the printer, her fingertips brushed the edge of the envelope the man had placed on the counter earlier before being told to move. It was only for a split second, but static surged through her skin, a quick pulse that made her flinch. The paper had an embedded chip, she knew that feeling. She'd only seen such technology used for upper-tier accounts, the kind that required direct federal clearance to even access. Her eyes shot toward Delmont, who stood talking to another manager. His posture composed, his tone easy. He was in his favorite element, authority, without challenge. "Make sure our friend doesn't wander," he said quietly to the security guard, who nodded. "We've had incidents before." The guard didn't ask what kind of incidents. He just stood a little closer to the man folding his arms. The man didn't seem to notice, or maybe didn't care. His gaze was steady, sweeping over the lobby not with resentment, but with observation. Every movement, every smirk, every whisper was being catalogued in his mind, like evidence in an invisible ledger. He had spent years studying power, how it disguised itself in tone, in posture, in the smallest flick of a smile. This to him was nothing new. He had learned that real control didn't shout. It watched, it waited, and it remembered. The tension climbed another notch when Delmont decided to make an example of him. Sir Delmont said loudly enough for others to hear, "Do you have any identification? Or perhaps a letter from the organization that referred you here?" A few people chuckled. The man stood slow and deliberate, and stepped forward until the faint scent of rain and paper met Delmont's cologne. "Everything you need," he said evenly, "is in the envelope." His voice carried not the fragility of apology, but the weight of command disguised as calm. Delmont smirked. "Well, since you're so sure, why don't you open it for us?" "It's sealed for authorization only," the man replied. "Then I suppose it will stay sealed until you can provide proof you belong here," Delmont said, his tone sharp enough to draw another round of amused murmurs. Iris felt her pulse race. She wanted to tell Delmont to stop, to at least scan the envelope, but her throat locked. Darren the guard shifted again, looking uncertain. He had worked there for years, had seen entitled clients lose their tempers, but this was different. The man didn't threaten or argue. He didn't flinch under insult. That kind of restraint scared Darren more than anger ever could. Across the room, the ceiling camera blinked, once its lens subtly zooming in on the man's face. The AI system flagged his image automatically. Executive tier clearance detected. The tag flickered red on Delmont's monitor for less than 2 seconds before disappearing. He didn't even notice. But the system had, and somewhere in the digital veins of the bank's network, an alert traveled quietly upward to the main branch without a single keystroke. The man, unaware, or perhaps entirely aware, looked down at the envelope in his hand. A drop of rainwater from his coat sleeve rolled across the wax seal and pooled near the edge, reflecting the fluorescent light like a drop of gold. He brushed it away with his thumb, the motion slow, reverent. It wasn't just a document, it was a key. "I asked you to sit," Delmont said, voice tightening when he realized the man hadn't returned to the metal chair. "You're disturbing our clients." "Your clients seem disturbed by many things," the man replied quietly. The words weren't loud, but they landed with precision, and the laughter died. Delmont's face froze for a moment, then forced a grin. "I'll tell you what," he said, lowering his voice, but not his arrogance. "Give me the envelope and I'll see what I can do. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe," the man said. He extended the envelope again. Delmont hesitated for a moment before taking it. The paper was heavier than expected, the wax seal embossed with a sigil he didn't recognize. He turned it over in his hand, frowning. "What is this government?" he asked. "Private," the man said simply. Delmont looked unconvinced, but unwilling to admit he didn't know. He placed the envelope on the counter and gestured to a nearby teller. "Get the fraud team ready," he said under his breath, though loud enough for Iris to hear. "We'll have some fun." Iris's stomach twisted. The man remained silent, his eyes following every move. The teller retrieved a small scanner, the kind used for counterfeit checks, and waved it over the envelope. A sharp beep echoed, and the machine displayed a line of red text encrypted biometric signature detected. The teller blinked, confused. "It's, coded Delmont," repeated mockingly. "Or cheap trick. Probably one of those novelty seals you can buy online." He reached out to press his thumb against the seal. The moment he did, the device beeped again, louder this time, and the monitor behind the counter flickered once, switching from the banking interface to a blank black screen. A single white line of text appeared: "Unauthorized access attempt recorded." Iris gasped. Delmont quickly pulled his hand back, pretending not to be startled. "System glitch," he muttered. But his voice had lost its certainty. He waved to the guard again, "Keep an eye on him." The tension in the lobby had thickened into something tangible, something that clung to the polished air like humidity before a storm. The black man remained seated near the trash bin, his trench coat damp from the rain. His presence impossible to ignore, but easy for the others to pretend away. The room carried on, or tried to. The low hum of printers, the clicking of pens, and the false laughter of customers returned, but beneath it all ran a quiet, current unease disguised as order. Iris Vale felt it most. Her eyes flickered toward the man again, drawn to the gold-sealed envelope resting across his lap. She couldn't explain it, but something about him felt deliberately composed, as if every breath he took had intention. He wasn't a man who had wandered into the wrong place. He was a man who had arrived exactly where he meant to. Delmont Ration, meanwhile, couldn't shake the sting of what had just happened. His attempt to open the envelope had ended with system warnings he couldn't explain. He'd brushed it off as coincidence, but deep down, a seed of doubt had sprouted. Still, pride demanded dominance. He straightened his tie and decided the best way to regain control was to humiliate the man publicly. Sir Delmont called out, his voice carrying across the lobby. "If you're waiting for service, it might help to have identification ready. We can't process donations without proper paperwork." The deliberate pause before the word donations made the nearby customers laugh again. The man didn't respond. His eyes drifted toward the far window, where rain streaked down in diagonal lines. He could see his reflection in the glass, the same calm, unreadable face that had stared down boardrooms and bureaucrats alike. He knew this pattern well. Mockery first, control second, regret last. It always ended the same way. Across the room, the bank's surveillance AI recalibrated. The biometric trigger from his envelope and the encryption spike from the earlier system error had set off a quiet cascade in the background network. Without anyone realizing, the camera nearest the security desk had switched to internal monitoring mode, transmitting a silent feed to the corporate ethics division's compliance servers. The man on the chair had become an observed client, a classification used only in federal audits. Darren the guard had no idea his earpiece had switched to recording mode. His next words, the tone, even the pause in his breathing, all of it was being logged, time-stamped, and archived. He approached the man cautiously, not out of hostility, but confusion. "Sir, do you need any help?" Darren asked quietly, lowering his voice so the others wouldn't hear. The man looked up. "I need patience," he said simply, his tone calm but filled with gravity. Darren nodded once, unsure how to reply, and stepped back again. A few seats away, a young mother tried to keep her son occupied while filling out a loan form. The boy, no older than 7, played with a small plastic police car, rolling it across the tiles. When it slipped from his hand and landed near the man's shoes, the boy froze. Before the mother could stop him, the man bent down, picked it up gently, and handed it back with a faint smile. "You dropped your cruiser," he said softly. The child's smartwatch beeped faintly as their fingers brushed. The mother frowned and pulled her son back quickly, whispering a curt "thank you" before turning away. The man didn't notice the flicker on the child's screen, a glowing line of text reading, "Access Pattern Trustee, Authentication Detected." The watch had connected to the branch's guest Wi-Fi, and that signal-innocent routine, unguarded, had just broadcast the man's fingerprint hash to every compliance server within the network's reach. Upstairs, unseen by everyone in the lobby, a dormant line of code in the regional security system awoke. The Tag Trustee Oversight Division appeared in a hidden feed and transmitted silently to headquarters. The black man sitting beside the trash bin was no longer anonymous. He had just become a verified entity. Back in the lobby, Delmont was talking louder now, as if volume could hide uncertainty. "You see, folks," he said to a nearby couple pretending not to listen, "we get all kinds walking in here thinking a coat and confidence can buy them an account. But that's not how the world works. Standards exist for a reason." The man didn't even turn his head. He had lived too long with people mistaking arrogance for intelligence. His silence unnerved Delmont more than any confrontation could have. "Are you hearing me?" Sir Delmont asked sharply. "Yes," the man said, looking up, "and you'll remember every word later." The simplicity of the statement stopped Delmont for half a heartbeat. There was no anger in it, no threat, just truth stated like fact. "Is that a warning?" Delmont asked, masking unease with a sneer. "It's a courtesy," the man replied. Iris exhaled, softly, realizing her knuckles were white from gripping her pen. She didn't understand what was happening, but her instinct told her to pay attention. Something was unfolding that didn't fit the usual rhythm of customer and clerk. It felt larger, like a slow turn of fate disguised as a normal day. The lights overhead flickered again, a momentary dimming that made the marble floor gleam darker. When they stabilized, Iris's screen refreshed with a new system notice, ethics observation in progress. She frowned, unsure what triggered it, and quickly minimized the window before Delmont could see. Her stomach tightened. Darren shifted his weight uneasily. He had seen plenty of difficult customers before, but never someone so calm that he made everyone else nervous. He kept watching the man, half expecting him to break, to shout, to prove the story Delmont wanted to believe. But he didn't. He just sat there, composed, as if waiting for the rest of the world to catch up to him. The boy's smartwatch chimed again. His mother silenced it, muttering under her breath about cheap tech. The data pulse it had sent, though, was already climbing digital ladders miles away, reaching encrypted channels reserved for the highest levels of institutional governance. It would take only one confirmation ping for the oversight network to activate the next sequence. And it would start right here, in this quiet, polished room that believed itself immune to consequence. "You're wasting your time," Delmont said, finally tired of being ignored. "Whatever scam this is, it won't work here. I've seen all kinds." The man tilted his head slightly. "No," he said, voice even almost gentle. "You've seen only one kind and you think they're all the same." That sentence landed like a whisper against glass. The lobby went still again. Even the machines seemed to pause. For a heartbeat, Delmont said nothing. Delmont Ration had always believed that power was something people could feel from across a room, that authority carried its own weight in posture and tone. But this morning, as he paced across the spotless marble, his words felt heavier than usual, not with power, but with unease. The black man by the trash bin hadn't moved, hadn't raised his voice, hadn't given anyone the satisfaction of a scene. That stillness was beginning to scare him. Delmont told himself that control demanded action. He couldn't stand the idea of being silently measured by someone he'd already decided was beneath him. So he decided to make an example. He straightened his tie, turned toward the lobby, and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice dripping with civility. "It's unfortunate when certain individuals confuse public institutions with personal charity, but at Braftoft Trust, we maintain standards." His eyes flicked towards the man. "This is not a street corner. This is a financial establishment. Respect must be earned." The room responded exactly as he wanted, quiet chuckles, approving nods, the ripple of complicity that kept small cruelties alive. Iris felt her throat tighten as she watched. The man remained seated, fingers resting lightly on the envelope, eyes lowered but alert. The fluorescent lights above flickered once more, and in that blink, Iris's monitor flashed a message that froze her in place. "Do not intervene yet. This is being documented." Her pulse quickened. She didn't understand who had sent it or how, but it came through the bank's internal channel, not an outside line. Someone somewhere was already watching. She glanced up at the nearest camera and noticed the faint red glow that hadn't been there earlier. The system was recording every sound, every insult, every smirk. Delmont continued, unaware that his words were being captured by the corporate ethics algorithm currently archiving his every syllable. "Sir," he said sharply, addressing the man again, "if you're waiting for a handout, I'll save you the trouble. There are social services that specialize in your situation." The man looked up. "My situation?" His voice was calm, unhurried, carrying the weight of experience rather than offense. "Yes," Delmont replied, smirking. "Whatever that may be." A man near the teller window snorted, trying to hide his grin. The sound cut through the air like a slap, but the black man didn't react. His silence made them uncomfortable, though none of them would admit it. The unspoken rule of humiliation was that the target had to play their part to get angry, to defend themselves, to make it easier for the crowd to justify its cruelty. But when the target didn't play, when he remained composed, it left the aggressor exposed. And that exposure now clung to Delmont like a shadow. The man shifted slightly in his seat, his voice low. "Do you always speak this way to clients before reading their credentials?" Delmont's grin tightened. "I speak this way to anyone who wastes my time. Then you must waste a great deal of your own," the man said quietly. It wasn't defiance, it was truth stated without edge. That made it worse. The laughter that had circled the lobby faltered. Delmont's pride, bruised and cornered, clawed for control. "Security," he snapped. "Make sure this individual is escorted outside if he continues to disturb our environment." Darren froze, unsure. The guard's instinct told him this wasn't just another scene. Something larger was happening, something that hummed beneath the surface of every word. "Sir, he's just sitting there," Darren said carefully. "Then maybe you'd prefer to join him," Delmont replied sharply. Darren hesitated but didn't move. The man spoke again, this time more softly, his tone measured. "It's not wise to raise your voice in a place meant to handle trust." "Oh, I think I can decide what's wise," Delmont shot back. "You people come in thinking you can challenge structure, but structure is what keeps the world balanced." The words hung there, ugly and revealing. Iris's eyes widened, her hands trembling slightly on the keyboard. The system log window beside her screen flickered with text recording incident under BIOS protocol. She realized then that the message earlier, "Do not intervene yet," had come from the oversight network itself. They were watching this in real time. The man didn't move, his eyes calm and deep fixed on Delmont. "You've mistaken structure for safety," he said. "They're not the same." For the first time, Delmont had no immediate retort. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It was condemning. The customers avoided eye contact. One woman checked her watch as if wishing time itself would rescue her from the weight of what she was witnessing. Even the hum of the ventilation seemed quieter. To fill the void, Delmont forced another laugh. "I think we've all had enough philosophy for the day," he said. "Sir, unless you can present a valid reason for being here, I'll have to assume this is trespassing." The man stood slow and deliberate. His height caught Delmont off guard. He hadn't realized the man was taller than him. When their eyes met, something in Delmont's chest tightened. There was no anger in that gaze, no aggression, just an unwavering certainty. "You already have what you need," the man said. "It's on your desk." Delmont frowned, glancing towards his office door. He hadn't been to his desk since the morning. He turned back, confused, but the man had already sat down again, as if the statement had never been made. Iris looked toward Delmont's office through the glass wall. A single envelope identical to the one the man held rested on the corner of the desk. She hadn't seen it there before. Delmont noticed it too, his face paling slightly. He tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it had been left earlier by another client. But the gold seal, she recognized it instantly. The same embossed mark. Her breath caught. She typed a note into the system to flag it, but the computer froze. The cursor blinked, and then a new message appeared. Observation Phase 2 initiated. Her stomach dropped. Delmont, trying to ignore the cold creeping up his spine, turned back toward the man and sneered. "You think tricks impress me? You're wasting everyone's time." "No," the man said, his voice steady, almost kind. "I'm measuring it." He leaned back, resting his hands on the envelope again. The lights flickered once more, longer this time. Every screen in the room glowed white before returning to normal. Iris's monitor updated automatically, the audit log expanding by itself. Every insult Delmont had uttered was now written on the screen in perfect transcript, tagged and time-stamped. She swallowed hard. The recording wasn't local. It was being uploaded directly to federal compliance. The branch had become a stage, and every actor was being judged by an unseen audience. Outside thunder rolled closer, echoing through the glass. The man turned his head toward the window, watching raindrops chase each other down the pane. He didn't smile, but there was a quietness in his expression, a kind of peace that belonged only to people who had already seen the ending of the story they were living. Delmont exhaled, forcing laughter again to save face. "Let's wrap this up," he said to the nearest teller. "We'll have him escorted out, logged and done." But before the teller could move, the bank's phone on the counter rang once, sharp and loud. No one reached for it. A second ring followed, then a third. The tension inside Braftoft Trust had reached its breaking point. The black man remained seated near the trash bin, his expression steady, his patience infuriatingly calm. Delmont stood near the counter, pretending to check data, his confidence thinning with every flicker of the lights. Iris kept glancing between her screen and the surveillance camera above her pulse, drumming in her ears. The system message that had appeared earlier still glowed faintly in the corner of her monitor. Observation Phase 2 initiated. She didn't know what that meant, but she could feel its weight pressing down on the air like invisible gravity. Then came the low rumble from outside. It was soft at first, a vibration beneath the floor more than a sound, but it grew clearer with every passing second. Through the tall glass windows at the front of the lobby, headlights cut through the gray rain. A sleek black sedan rolled up to the curb, its surface glistening under the drizzle. The vehicle didn't have plates, just a matte emblem on the front grille that looked unfamiliar, half symbol, half authority. Delmont frowned, his brow furrowing. He didn't recognize the car, but something about it radiated importance. He turned toward the receptionist. Expecting a client, he asked sharply. She shook her head quickly. "No, sir, not on the schedule." "Then who?" Delmont began, but before he could finish, the car door opened with mechanical precision. A woman stepped out her presence, cutting through the wet air like a blade. She was tall, silver-haired, dressed in charcoal gray wool that moved with her like it remembered power. Even through the glass, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. The security scanner at the entrance blinked twice red, then white, as if trying to process something beyond its clearance. A soft electronic chime echoed through the system, and Iris's monitor flashed Visitor Recognition Executive Security Override. The name that appeared for a second before vanishing was Filosa Gray. Delmont's throat tightened. He had seen that name once years ago in an internal memo that wasn't meant for him. It was attached to the board's compliance oversight branch, the highest tier of authority in the entire trust network. Before he could speak, the glass doors parted with a faint hiss. The woman entered, rainwater glistening on her coat sleeves, her heels striking the floor in measured rhythm. She didn't pause to remove her gloves. Her eyes scanned the room, once cold, assessing surgical. They landed on the man by the trash bin. "Director Kane," she said, her tone clear and unyielding, "the review sequence has been authorized. The primary audit begins here." Every word landed like a hammer against the marble silence. Iris froze in her chair, the pen falling from her hand and clattering onto the counter. Darren straightened instinctively, unsure whether to salute or step back. Delmont just stood there blinking, trying to process what he had heard. "Director," the word replayed in his head like an error message. The black man didn't stand right away. He simply lifted his head, the calm never leaving his face. "Thank you, Filosa," he said. "Proceed." That was when the first system alert rang through the building, not loud, but precise. A single tone that signaled internal lockdown protocol. The lobby lights dimmed slightly, their brightness shifting to a cooler hue as the network rerouted to emergency power. Screens across the teller counters flickered, displaying system notifications. Federal compliance engagement active. External access restricted. Personnel remain in place. Delmont took an involuntary step back. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice cracking. Who authorized Filosa didn't look at him. She turned to the front desk and removed a small black device from her coat pocket. It was no larger than a phone, its surface marked with an emblem that matched the one on the sedan outside. She placed it on the counter. A soft pulse emanated from it, spreading through the air like invisible ripples. Every monitor synchronized at once, displaying a seal none of them had ever seen before Sovereign Fiduciary Council Federal Oversight Division. Iris covered her mouth, her eyes wide. Delmont stumbled a step closer to the counter, his disbelief breaking through arrogance. "This is impossible," he said. "You can't just walk in here and what?" Filosa interrupted, her tone ice cold. "Hold you accountable?" She turned her gaze toward him, and for the first time, Delmont felt the full weight of hierarchy press down on him, like gravity. "You've been under silent evaluation for 11 months, Mr. Raskin. Every action, every recorded conversation, every misconduct toward clients cataloged under behavioral ethics review." The words struck him harder than a shout. "This is insane," he stammered. "There's no notice, no memo, nothing." "Because it was deliberate," Filosa said. "True character doesn't reveal itself when it expects to be watched." She looked toward Director Kane. "He's been consistent." Kane stood then, rising to his full height. The light caught his face differently now. Gone was the shadow of anonymity. In its place stood presence, dignified, deliberate, undeniable. His coat no longer looked worn. It looked purposeful, like a uniform chosen for contrast. The envelope still rested in his hand, the seal unbroken. He stepped forward slowly, every movement quiet, yet commanding. "Mr. Ration," he said evenly, "you had the chance to read this when it was offered to you. Now it becomes evidence." He placed the envelope gently on the counter, the sound of it landing echoing like a gavel. "You're the branch manager, correct?" Delmont nodded automatically, throat dry. "Then you're responsible for the behavior of your staff and the integrity of this institution. Unfortunately, today, both have failed." Filosa produced another document from her case. "Effective immediately, this branch is under operational suspension. All accounts frozen. All employees are to remain for interview." The announcement rippled through the lobby in stunned silence. A woman at a nearby counter gasped. Darren, unsure what to do, instinctively stepped aside. The black man, Director Kane, turned slightly toward him and nodded. "You've done your job, officer," he said. "No further action is needed." Darren swallowed, then gave a single, respectful nod. "Yes, sir." Delmont, pale now, struggled to keep his composure. This can't be real. I didn't do anything wrong. I was following protocol." Protocol, Kane said softly, was never designed to excuse prejudice. His voice carried no anger, only certainty. "And your words today have written your own report." Filosa tapped her device again, and the bank's intercom system came alive with a tone. A calm, automated voice echoed through every hallway. Operational lock confirmed. All personnel remain within assigned zones. External communications disabled. The doors at the front sealed with a mechanical click. The world outside faded into background rain. Iris stared at her screen, watching as every account number on the system turned gray, each labeled frozen pending review. Delmont's reflection glimmered faintly on the glass partition. He looked smaller now, stripped of authority, his posture hunched under the weight of his choices. Filosa approached the front desk again, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Ration, she said you were given a test. You failed it before it even began." Kane looked toward Iris, his tone softening. "Miss Vale," he said, "thank you for maintaining professionalism when others didn't. That will be noted." Iris couldn't find her voice, only knotted tears forming from the mixture of fear and relief. The thunder outside rolled again, a deep sound like the closing of a heavy door. Kane turned toward Delmont one final time. "When a structure forgets humanity, it loses its purpose. You believed order meant control, but control without conscience is chaos in disguise." The room was locked in stillness, a frozen diorama of fear and disbelief. The rain outside had turned heavier, pelting against the glass like a relentless drumbeat, echoing the pulse of every person trapped inside the branch. Delmont Ration stood rigid near the counter, his once perfect posture slumped under the weight of confusion and dawning dread. The name Director Kane reverberated in his mind like a bell he couldn't unhear. Across from him, the black man, no longer a nameless stranger, stood with quiet certainty, his hand resting gently on the gold-sealed envelope that had started it all. Filosa Gray stood beside him, her presence a command all its own, her eyes trained not on Delmont, but on the glass wall behind him, as if watching the storm outside reveal something invisible. The hum of computers dimmed. A single chime broke the silence. It came from the phone on Delmont's podium, his private line, the one connected directly to corporate headquarters reserved for emergencies. The screen lit up with an identification tag so high level that for a split second it displayed a string of encrypted characters before resolving into 3 words: Executive Compliance Board. Delmont hesitated. His mouth was dry, his fingers trembling. No one had ever called from that line before. "You might want to answer that," Kane said quietly, his tone steady but firm. Delmont's head jerked up. "What is this? What's happening to my branch, your branch?" Kane replied, "is finally telling the truth about itself." Delmont swallowed and pressed the speaker button. For a moment there was only static, the faint crackle of a connection reaching across a great distance. Then a voice came through, cold, mechanical, precise. "Delmont Ration, this is Executive Compliance. You are currently in the presence of a federal trustee. This communication is being recorded and observed under Clause 7 of the Sovereign Fiduciary Charter. You are instructed to remain silent until the directive concludes. The sound wasn't human. It was the digitized cadence of authority beyond argument. Delmont froze his mouth half open. The voice continued unemotional and absolute. The individual identified as Osri L. Kane holds senior-level authorization for oversight of all trust and asset management divisions across the Eastern Financial Network. His assessment of this branch has reached conclusion phase. Your conduct and all recorded interactions from the past 11 months are under direct federal review. Gasps broke the silence. The tellers looked at each other, fear painted across every face. Iris clutched the edge of her desk, her eyes wide as the words poured through the air. The voice didn't stop. Effective immediately, all accounts under your managerial purview are frozen. Your clearance credentials are suspended. Your administrative badge is void. Do not attempt to access internal systems. Delmont felt his knees weaken. He looked at the phone as if it might give him a chance to speak, but the voice overrode him. Do not respond. This transmission is one way. Behind him, the lobby lights dimmed further. The glass walls that separated the tellers from the clients began to change color, slowly darkening until they mirrored the room itself. Every person inside saw their reflection, staring back at them, every face, every expression, every tremor of guilt. Across the glass, red text began to scroll like a silent revelation. Behavioral violation. Clause 14, e-bias and misconduct. Recorded instances 12. Pattern of derogatory conduct confirmed. The scrolling continued, listing dates and timestamps of every offense, each one tied to video footage, being archived in real time. Iris covered her mouth as her name appeared among the witnesses. She wasn't accused, she was listed under observer, non-participant. Darren's name appeared too, followed by attempted de-escalation logged. Delmont's name, however, dominated the display, appearing again and again under violations ranging from client discrimination to manipulation of employee conduct. His own reflection stared back at him, pale and stunned, surrounded by the red glow of the text wrapping around his image like chains. This can't be real, he whispered. It's a mistake. Velosa turned her head toward him. The only mistake was believing your power was permanent. Kane stepped forward, his voice measured, not cruel. When you first saw me, what did you see? Delmont blinked, unable to answer. I saw no. Kane interrupted gently. You didn't see, you decided. He lifted the envelope again and placed it on the counter. That decision defined everything that followed. The phone clicked once more, the automated voice resuming its reading. Under authority of the Sovereign Fiduciary Council, and by order of the Eastern Federal Compliance Directorate, this branch is hereby declared under direct review. Internal locks are now engaged. All system communications rerouted through the audit grid. Please remain in your current positions. The mirrored glass shifted again, and for a moment the scrolling stopped. Then, in the center of the reflection appeared a single new message: Federal Oversight active. Do not attempt removal of personnel. The weight of the words pressed against everyone's chest. Even those who had mocked the man earlier now stood frozen in their own shame, their eyes fixed on the mirror, as if the glass itself was forcing them to confront what they had become part of. Darren moved to stand near Iris, whispering, "This is bigger than a branch issue. This feels like the whole system's being tested." Iris nodded slowly, her voice barely audible. And he's the test. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the sedan still idling at the curb. Its headlights reflected against the mirrored glass twin beams cutting through the red text. Inside, the room was bathed in the faint glow of warning lights from the teller stations. Velosa retrieved a tablet from her briefcase and entered a verification code. The screens across the branch flickered again, displaying a federal seal that read Ethics Oversight Division Live Audit Session. Delmont tried once more to salvage his dignity. "Director Kane," he said, forcing composure, "whatever this is. You can't." "Can't what?" Kane asked softly. "Hold you accountable." "That's the problem, Delmont. You think accountability is optional. You tricked me," Delmont said, his voice cracking. "You came in here under false pretenses." "No," Kane replied. "I came here as myself. You were the one who refused to see it. The mirrored glass continued to scroll, now displaying client complaints that had never been processed, ignored emails, and misconduct reports buried under bureaucratic language. Every hidden act of neglect resurfaced line by line. The truth had turned digital. The bank had become its own witness. Filosa looked up from her tablet. "The directive requires acknowledgement," she said. "The system won't close until the accused confirms receipt." Kane nodded. "He'll confirm." Delmont shook his head violently. "I won't sign anything. I won't admit to this." The automated voice returned. "Acknowledgement required. Please confirm your name." Delmont didn't speak. The voice repeated the line louder this time. "Acknowledge your name to confirm receipt of directive." His reflection in the mirrored wall looked back at him, broken, sweating, hollow. Finally, his voice cracked through the silence. "Delmont Ration." The glass shimmered. The text on the screen changed to "Green acknowledgement confirmed." The mirrored surface turned transparent again, revealing the storm outside. The reflection of every person inside faded, leaving them exposed beneath the harsh fluorescent glow. The phone emitted one final tone and disconnected. Filosa exhaled quietly. "Phase 3 complete," she said. "Lockdown stable." Kane turned toward the staff, his voice even but heavy. "None of you are prisoners," he said. "But every one of you is accountable for action, for silence, for laughter that lasted too long." His eyes met Iris's for a moment, a flicker of empathy there, then moved to Delmont. "You built this environment. Now you get to see what it feels like to live inside it." Outside thunder rolled again, shaking the glass panels. The sound reverberated through the building like the closing of a vault door. The air inside felt charged alive with consequence. Across from him, Director Osri L. Kane stood motionless, the quiet strength of his posture both calm and commanding. Filosa Gray remained near the counter, eyes fixed on her device, as new streams of data poured in from the oversight servers. Every few seconds, the system released another encrypted code, followed by a metallic chime. The branch was alive with the hum of revelation. Iris Vale could feel it in her bones, that vibration of something irreversible, the hum of justice coded into circuitry. The mirrored glass, now faintly transparent again, began to shimmer with text. At first it was numbers, columns of data, account IDs, timestamps, but then the letters sharpened into words. A new header appeared. Ethical audit, summary trustee ledger. Access granted. Iris leaned closer. Breath caught in her throat. "What is that?" she whispered. Filosa didn't look up. "That she said is the truth. Every transaction, every deviation, every abuse hidden under procedure. And it's all stored here." How could it open by itself?" Iris asked. Filosa's tone softened. "It didn't open by itself. It opened because he's here." The pronoun hung in the air like prophecy. Kane stepped forward, his presence drawing every gaze. He approached the main teller terminal, placed his hand over the scanner, and the system responded instantly, light flaring blue across his palm. The display unlocked, revealing layers of encrypted archives that none of the staff had ever known existed. On the screen beneath his hand glowed a title that seemed both ancient and futuristic: Trustee Oversight Ledger Director. Authentication verified. Iris's eyes widened. "Director, you're the one who wrote it," she said softly, realizing as she spoke. Kane's lips curved faintly, not into a smile, but acknowledgement. 10 years ago, he said this network was designed to monitor integrity across financial systems. Not to control people, but to measure their choices when they thought no one was watching. "You created it?" she asked. "The entire framework, every line of its code," he replied. "And every value it measures was written to prevent exactly what happened here today." The words settled like thunder inside the walls. Filosa turned the screen toward Delmont, who still hadn't moved. "Your ledger entry," she said, "isn't just about today. It's 10 years of patterns, inflated account metrics, client manipulation, internal staff coercion, all buried under procedural justification." Delmont blinked, eyes unfocused. "This can't be right," he muttered. "You can't just rewrite history. History doesn't need rewriting." Kane said quietly, "It just needed permission to speak." The screen flickered, and the data expanded rows upon rows of names, dollar amounts, and behavioral tags. The AI-driven ledger had not only recorded financial discrepancies, but also categorized human behavior, derogatory tone detected. Power misuse pattern, consistent. Ethical deviation, index 87%. Each entry was time-stamped, stored, and verified against voice recordings. The system had been watching long before any of them realized. Iris felt a shiver crawl up her spine as she scrolled through the list. It wasn't just Delmont. Every executive, every manager, every senior officer across the Eastern Division had a record. The machine didn't lie. It simply remembered. "How far does it go?" she whispered. Kane's gaze didn't waver. All the way up. Filosa looked at the next section of data, her fingers pausing over one line. Her eyes flicked toward Kane with faint disbelief. "Sir," she said, her voice quieter, "now the trustee account listed under your name." It's 2.6 billion. Kane finished for her, his tone level. "The ledger isn't only for them, Filosa. It judges me too. The entire oversight fund exists because I refused to let any of it be hidden behind privilege again." Delmont's head lifted, confusion twisting into disbelief. "You're saying all this spectacle is funded by you?" Kane nodded once. "Every audit, every system check, every equity fund that supports fairness initiatives across this network, they're financed from my trust." "Why?" Iris asked softly. "Because I've seen what power does to people who think they own it," Kane said. "They start believing humanity is optional." The rain outside surged harder, beating against the glass like applause from a world finally allowed to bear witness. Inside, the red text scrolling across the mirrored wall turned white, signaling that the audit was complete. Then came a sound, deep, resonant metallic. The vault door at the back of the branch began to unlock itself. Delmont flinched. "What now? Final validation," Filosa said. "System requires physical confirmation from the highest trustee clearance." "That's him." Kane walked toward the vault, each step echoing across the marble like the punctuation marks of inevitability. Darren instinctively moved aside, clearing his path. The air felt electric, alive with consequence. Kane pressed his palm to the biometric scanner beside the vault door. The lights shifted from red to white, and with a mechanical hiss, the door opened. Inside was not money, but machinery, a labyrinth of servers glowing with blue and gold light. The heartbeat of the branch, the ledger's physical core. Kane stepped inside. Streams of data flowed across the walls, holographic projections of years of hidden behavior. He raised his hand, and the system responded, projecting the entire organizational hierarchy before them. The top tiers of the bank, the network of executive offices, the lines of command that had once seemed untouchable, all illuminated in one transparent structure. "This," Kane said, "is what justice looks like when it's built to last. No speeches, no revenge. Just record and reckon." Filosa entered behind him, activating the compliance relay on her device. One by one, the staff watched as the names of corrupt executives turned red, each tagged "suspension pending review." The system didn't just expose it, acted. Across the city, offices belonging to those names would be locking down in real-time accounts, frozen access revoked. Kane stepped back out of the vault. His eyes moved over the remaining staff, those who had mocked, those who had stayed silent, and those few, like Iris and Darren, who had hesitated but not participated. The staff stood silent, staring at the transparent screens, where names of executives flashed red one after another. Entire hierarchies collapsing under the weight of their own deceit. Iris watched the scrolling data with wide eyes, feeling the same awe one might feel witnessing a dam break not out of chaos, but necessity. Filosa Gray was still at her station, typing rapidly, her device now connected directly to the national oversight grid. The final verification seals flickered across the screen, a cascade of blue check marks, marking the completion of Phase 3. But before the last confirmation could appear, a new alert flashed across every terminal external command detected. Source Regional Headquarters. Command Override Audit Sequence. The words pulsed in red. Delmont lifted his head for the first time in minutes, desperation flickering in his eyes. "They're canceling this," he whispered. "They're overriding you." His tone held the hollow triumph of a man drowning who suddenly believes the tide is retreating. Kane's expression didn't change. He stepped closer to the main console and looked at the code scrolling rapidly across the glass. The override command was sophisticated, encrypted at the highest level, the kind used by the board itself. Filosa frowned, fingers flying across her tablet. "They're initiating a top-down rollback," she said. "They're trying to erase the audit from the root directory." "They can't," Kane said quietly. "The system doesn't belong to them anymore." The words were calm, but something beneath them pulsed an undercurrent of inevitability. The override attempt reached 90%, then stalled. A sharp electronic tone pierced the silence. The mirrored glass flashed white. "Unauthorized access detected. Regional headquarters compromised." And then, as if the building itself took a breath, every monitor flickered before displaying a new message: "Security purge initiated. Executive floors offline." Across the city, 3 entire floors of the regional headquarters went dark. Lights, networks, and communications shut down in synchronized precision. Iris gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Did you just—" No, Kane interrupted softly. "The system did." Filosa turned toward him, eyes sharp. "You coded it to respond this way, I coded it to protect itself," he said. The moment they tried to interfere, they confirmed the audit's legitimacy. Outside, lightning illuminated the skyline, briefly reflecting off the skyscraper opposite the branch. In that flash, Iris saw something extraordinary. Another building across the street, its top floors flickering, as if undergoing its own power surge. "It's happening there too," she murmured. "Not just here." As if on cue, the ceiling above them whirred faintly. A mechanical click echoed through the lobby, and a section of the ceiling panel slid open. From within, a hidden projector descended its lens, glowing to life. The light burst downward, scattering across the glass floor until the images began to form. Grainy at first, then sharpening into clarity, the footage showed multiple bank branches across the region, all identical in layout, all frozen mid-operation. Their staff staring at screens as their systems locked down, just like this one. "Oh my God," Darren whispered. "It's everywhere." Filosa confirmed it with a glance at her data feed. 32 branches, she said. Simultaneous audits, nationwide. The footage shifted again, showing a map of the United States with glowing red nodes spreading outward like veins of fire. Each pulse marked an active compliance event expanding city by city, branch by branch. "It's not just a review," Iris said softly. "It's a purge." Delmont staggered backward, his voice cracking. "You've started a war. Do you have any idea what you've done? You'll crash the entire financial network." Kane turned toward him, eyes steady. "You can't crash what's already rotting. You can only rebuild it." Delmont shook his head violently. "You think you're some savior? You're tearing everything down." "No," Kane replied. "I'm giving it back to the people it was built to serve." The projector continued its display, shifting to live footage of executives being escorted out of their offices by federal agents. The sound was muted, but the imagery spoke louder than any announcement could. Real-time justice was unfolding not behind closed doors, but in daylight, transmitted directly into the heart of the system that had thrived on secrecy. Filosa's voice broke through the hum of electronics. "Director, the board has gone silent. Their communication servers just dropped offline." Kane nodded. "They'll stay that way until they learn to operate under transparency." He looked toward Iris and Darren. "Truth doesn't destroy institutions. It cleans them." Iris swallowed, her voice trembling. "And if the ones above you fight back, then they reveal themselves as the problem," he said. The marble floor vibrated faintly as the vault systems recalibrated to the new hierarchy. The sound was subtle, but constant, a deep resonant hum like the low growl of an awakening machine. Delmont sank to the floor, his bravado collapsing into hollow laughter. "You really believe this changes anything? Someone will rebuild it. Someone worse. That's how the world works." Kane crouched beside him, not unkindly. "Maybe," he said, "but today they'll have to build it on the ashes of accountability." Delmont's laugh died in his throat. He looked up at Kane with something that almost resembled remorse. "What about me?" he asked quietly. "What happens to people like me?" Kane's expression softened slightly. "That depends on whether you learn or just remember." The projector's feed switched again, this time displaying a digital archive labeled Restorative Division. Beneath it were words that silenced the room reassignment, ethics, and inclusion program. Iris recognized the name of the branch where it was located, a small community office downtown, known for working with underserved clients. "You're giving him another chance," she asked. "Not forgiveness," Kane said. "Work. Understanding isn't earned by apology, it's built through service." Filosa confirmed the assignment with a tap on her tablet. Effective immediately. Transfer logged. Delmont stared at the screen, unable to speak. His reflection looked older now, hollowed but human. Kane rose his coat, brushing against the edge of the desk as he turned toward the projector. "Every empire built on humiliation thinks it will last forever," he said quietly. "But the truth doesn't shout, it waits." The projector's light dimmed, leaving only the faint glow of the storm-filtered daylight through the rain-streaked glass. Outside sirens echoed faintly, federal transports moving through the city, unseen but inevitable. The air inside the branch grew lighter, as though the weight of years had finally been lifted from it. Filosa turned to Kane. "Audit expansion complete. Every branch connected. Every record synchronized." "Then the system is awake," Kane said. He faced the staff one last time. "You were witnesses today, don't waste that. When people come asking what happened, tell them it wasn't chaos. Tell them it was truth finding its voice." He turned toward the door, the automated locks releasing with a hiss. Rainlight spilled across the floor as the doors slid open. Kane stepped out into the storm, the water soaking into his coat, but he didn't raise an umbrella. Inside, the air was warmer, softer, as if the building itself had exhaled the tension it had held for years. The same floors once polished by arrogance now bore footprints of humility and change. Iris Vale had stayed. She had been offered a position elsewhere, but chose to remain, believing that to rebuild something broken was more meaningful than to start fresh somewhere untouched. Every morning she arrived early, arranging the new community counter, with pamphlets about financial inclusion and fairness audits, each stamped with the emblem of the Renewal Initiative. Few people knew the fund behind it came directly from Director Osri L. Kane's private holdings. No publicity, no signature, just quiet restoration, paid for by a man who had disappeared as silently as he arrived. Darren had stayed too, now serving as community liaison. His security uniform replaced with a blue vest embroidered with the word support. He smiled more now, his posture easy, his voice calm. He often told new hires that the day the branch shut down was the day it finally opened. They didn't always understand, but they felt the difference. And then there was Delmont Ration. He walked into the building one Monday morning with a paper bag lunch and a visitor badge clipped to his collar. His tailored suits were gone, replaced by khaki pants and a plain gray sweater. No one announced him. No one pointed. The old guard who had once laughed with him now averted their eyes out of quiet discomfort. But he didn't mind. For the first time in his life, he wasn't seeking eyes to follow him. He headed to the back of the lobby where a small workstation had been set up for volunteers, cataloging old transaction archives for transfer to the new system. It was slow, repetitive work, renaming files, attaching tags, merging duplicates, but Delmont didn't complain. He worked with the patience of someone learning to live inside silence. Iris noticed him from her desk and offered a polite nod. "Morning, Mr. Ration," she said softly. He returned the nod with a faint smile. "Morning, Iris. And it's just Delmont now." "Of course," she said, and left it at that. By noon, the branch had settled into a rhythm of quiet motion. Customers came and went, students opening small accounts, seniors asking about debt forgiveness programs, families bringing children to learn budgeting through the new financial literacy classes. It was no longer a monument of wealth, it had become a school of accountability. Delmont sat alone in the back, clicking through archived data. Each file he opened revealed fragments of his old life memos. He'd written reports he'd signed, disciplinary notes he'd approved. Every word was a mirror, and every sentence reminded him how power had once sounded in his mouth, sharp, polished, and hollow. At one point, as he was sorting through a directory marked Legacy Compliance Logs, a new file appeared at the bottom of the list. It hadn't been there before. The timestamp was current, created that very moment. The file name was a single word, reflection. He hesitated, then double-clicked. The document opened to reveal just one paragraph written in a voice he recognized instantly. You once believed control was proof of worth. Now you know that control without empathy is emptiness. What you choose next will not erase what came before, but it will define what remains. Bucket Delmont stared at the screen for a long time, his breath caught between shame and relief. The initials OK were unmistakable. He looked around, half expecting someone to be watching, but no one seemed to notice. The letter wasn't stored in any known directory. It was personal, hidden deep within the system, waiting for him alone. He printed it quietly and folded the paper into his wallet. That night, long after the branch closed, he stayed behind to finish filing the last batch of records. The glow from the monitors cast a pale light on his face, and for the first time, he didn't look like a man haunted by loss. He looked like someone rebuilding himself piece by piece. Around 9, Iris returned to check the security locks and found him still there. You should go home, she said gently. I will, he said, not turning from the screen. Just a few more. She hesitated, then asked, Do you ever think about him? Delmont's eyes softened. Every day, he said, but not the way I used to. I used to hate him for humiliating me. Now I think maybe he gave me back something I'd lost before I even noticed it was gone. What's that, she asked. The ability to listen, he said simply. The next morning, the city newspaper ran a quiet story on page 6. No photos, no headlines in bold. It simply read, National Renewal Initiative expands to 90 branches. Anonymous benefactor funds, ethics training, and community inclusion programs. No one at Braftoft Trust mentioned it out loud, but they all knew whose hand had set it in motion. In the weeks that followed, the old habits faded. The hierarchy dissolved. Managers who once barked orders now listened. Clients who once avoided the counters now lingered to talk. Even the walls felt different, as though years of indifference had been scrubbed out of the marble. Yet not all scars vanished. Some remained as they should. In the far corner of the branch next to the trash bin where it had all begun stood a single metal chair. No one sat there. It wasn't removed or replaced. It stayed as a quiet reminder, a monument to the moment silence spoke louder than authority. Delmont often glanced at it as he passed, feeling the weight of memory settle over him, not as punishment, but as purpose. Every so often he would catch Iris watching him too, her expression unreadable, somewhere between forgiveness and respect. One evening, as the last customers left, he walked over to the chair and placed his visitor badge on it. For the man who showed me what I refused to see, he whispered. Then he turned off the lights and left. The next morning, his badge was gone. In its place sat a folded note. Iris found it and recognized the same handwriting from the letter she'd once seen framed in Philosa Gray's office months later. It read, You understood. That's enough. Signed again. Okay. No one saw Osrikine return, but his presence lingered in the building like gravity, unseen, yet undeniable. The renewal initiative spread quietly across the nation, reshaping not just policies, but people. There were no press conferences, no grand speeches, no cameras to capture the transformation. Only small, steady changes. Kindness, replacing pride. Fairness, replacing fear. Dignity, replacing hierarchy. In a world addicted to power, Kane had left something more lasting responsibility. And somewhere in a modest apartment, Delmont Rashin began writing again, not memos or directives, but reflections. His first entry began, It is easier to lead through fear than through understanding. The city moved differently now. Months had passed since the storm, but the air still carried a certain clarity, like the residue of something purified. Braftoft Trust. Now, the renewal branch had become a case study in transformation. University professors cited it in lectures journalists visited to observe its operations, and students took notes in the lobby where not long ago humiliation had replaced humanity. Yet for all the attention, no one knew where the movement had truly begun. No one except those who had seen it unfold. The chair beside the trash bin still stood untouched in the corner, unmarked, unpolished, gleaming faintly under the morning light. Some thought it was symbolic, others thought it was oversight. But for Iris Vale, who opened the branch every morning, it was something more, a promise that no story, however painful, should ever be erased. The Renewal Initiative had grown beyond their small lobby. Branches across the country had adopted the new ethical framework, integrating community outreach, transparency audits, and personal accountability into every department. Corporate culture had changed not overnight, but steadily, like water shaping stone. And though no one spoke his name in official circles, every employee knew the origin. Osriel Kane had become a legend not through fame, but through absence. He had walked away the moment his work was complete, leaving no trail of self-congratulation, only systems that continued his work without needing his presence. His silence became the standard for leadership, a model that proved restraint was stronger than dominance, and quiet conviction outlasted noise. Iris had begun keeping a small journal on her desk, something she'd learned from watching Delmont. She wrote not about numbers or procedures, but about moments. The elderly couple who cried when their first home loan was approved under the new Fairness Act. The single mother who brought her teenage son to open his first savings account and whispered, "This place feels safe now." The veteran who walked in with a folded flag and asked if his pension funds could help start a scholarship. All of them carried stories, and every story traced back to that morning when a man in a faded coat refused to be erased. Delmont still worked in the archives, but his role had changed. He no longer sorted files alone. Now he trained interns, teaching them patience and humility. Sometimes he caught them staring at the chair in the corner and would tell them that's where the world turned right again. He never said more than that because some truths didn't need explaining. They needed to be lived. One afternoon, Iris found him sitting quietly, reading from his journal. "I've been thinking," he said, "about how justice isn't about revenge. It's about restoration." She smiled. "You sound like him." Delmont chuckled softly. Maybe that's the point. He glanced at the letter still tucked into his wallet, the ink faded but legible. "What you choose next will not erase what came before, but it will define what remains." He lived by that now. So did the branch. The renewal program expanded into schools, workplaces, even government offices. Every system that once measured profit began learning to measure dignity. And in that slow, unseen revolution, the world found balance again. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the glass towers of the city, Iris received a letter with no return address. Inside was a simple card, embossed with a trident and shield emblem. Beneath it were 3 words: "Keep building forward." No signature. But she knew. She placed it in the drawer beside her journal and whispered, "We are." Far from the city, in a quiet coastal town, a small foundation office overlooked the water. Inside, Osri Kane sat at a modest desk surrounded by paperwork, not grand reports or media requests, but letters from people whose lives had changed. He never replied to them directly. He read, he smiled, and he filed them neatly into a wooden cabinet labeled Proof. He believed proof was not spoken, it was shown. His dog, a gray-muzzled shepherd named Morrow, rested near his feet, occasionally lifting its head to the sound of seagulls. The world no longer needed him in meetings or headlines. His work lived in every policy, rewritten, every system corrected, every apology spoken by people who once couldn't understand the weight of their actions. Kane leaned back, watching the horizon blur into the sea. The waves rolled in patterns, always new, yet always the same. He had learned long ago that change was like the tide. It didn't ask permission. It just returned again and again until it reshaped everything it touched. He opened his last file for the night, stamped it with the seal of the Renewal Initiative, and paused for a moment before closing it. The final report wasn't about money or management. It was a single-page memo titled Human Worth Policy Revision. The last line read, "To build a world that measures integrity before wealth." He signed his initials OK and placed it on the pile. Outside, dusk melted into night. He stood, slipped on his coat, and stepped onto the balcony. The air was salt and wind and memory. Morrow followed, pressing close to his leg. Kane watched the lights of the city flicker miles away. Somewhere beyond those towers, a single metal chair still stood by a wall, silent but unmovable, a monument to what had changed the world more than power ever could dignity. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, and whispered into the wind. It was never about shutting them down. It was about waking them up. The words vanished into the sea air, carried away to the same place where all truths eventually go to be reborn as echoes in other lives. In the city, the renewal branch closed for the night. The lights dimmed, leaving only one lamp burning near the chair by the trash bin. A cleaning woman paused, noticing something beneath the chair's leg, a gold seal, small and round, pressed into the marble. She bent down to touch it, reading the faint inscription etched beneath. It said, "Integrity doesn't demand applause, it demands persistence." She smiled, straightened the chair, and whispered, "Yes, it does." The light above flickered once as if agreeing before the branch returned to stillness. The next morning, the sun rose clean and bright, flooding through the glass, catching the reflection of that single metal chair. It gleamed not because it was polished, but because it had endured. Justice, after all, had not arrived through punishment, but through presence. And in that presence, something had shifted forever. Power no longer spoke the loudest. Quiet did. The end. If this story moved, you take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps us keep sharing stories that remind people what dignity and courage look like. Tell us what part hit you hardest, and drop a comment about where you're watching from. Your thoughts help keep these stories alive.